Friends, thank you so much for being here. And good morning to those on the West Coast, good afternoon to those on the East Coast, and good evening to our scholar in Israel or anyone else who's overseas. I want to let you know about a program we have next week, this called Sacred Soundtrack, the Poetry and Music of Piyut from Jewish communities around the world with Rabbi Rolando Matalon. That is next Thursday at 1 Mountain Time, 3 Eastern. Many other programs to tune into. And we are really excited to have Rabbanit Batya Hefter here with us today to talk about Avraham. What is the source of his faith? And we had previously planned this program months ago, and we appreciate everyone's flexibility to adapt their schedules to our need to adjust. Let me tell you just briefly who our scholar is, and then I'll hand it over to her. Rabbanit Batya Hefter is the founder of Lev Nachon, Center for Transformative Torah, transmitting the Hasidic masters' teachings into a vital, ethical, and spiritual path for the modern seeking Jew. Batya is completing the manuscript of her first forthcoming book, Opening the Window, Hasidic Readings for Life, the teachings of Rabbi Leiner of Ishbitz-Radzyn, and she just released her song entitled L'David Hashem Ori. So friends, let's open up our minds and hearts to the source of faith of Avraham, and please join me in welcoming Rabbanit Batya Hefter. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rosh Shmuley. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here with the Valley Beit Midrash. I've been watching you all from afar for a very, very long time, and it's nice to finally find the time to be with you. So those of you who are on screen, thank you for being on screen. It's helpful for me. Oh, hello, Susan. So I love to see people on. If you can't, that's okay. I understand. But it's really, it's nice to see people. I'd like to, I also ran a community Beit Midrash. I founded and ran a community Beit Midrash for 20 years. And so for many, many years, I was also involved in teaching all kinds of material that led up to my passion and my love for the Hasidic texts. I spent a lot of time in Midrash, so we're going to be looking also at a Midrash today. I'd like to share with you, I'd like to introduce you and bring you in gently to the Hasidic masters and why it is I think that they're so important. But as opposed to talking about them, I want you to just encounter them through the source that we're going to be, a couple sources that we're going to be learning today. And in order to allow us enough time to be able to share and talk, I didn't bring a lot of sources. Now, let's just open up with Avraham, right? You'd say, the question that I had asked myself, why did God choose Avraham? And of course, we all know so many positive things about Avraham, but initially, in the beginning of the teaching, I'm going to read you the last verses from Parshat Noach, and that's where Avraham comes on the scene. And if you don't mind, I'll read a bit in Hebrew and we'll translate into English. You have them in front of you. Does everyone have the sources in front of them? Yes, a show of hands, because I don't have them on the, I'm not putting it on the screen right now. Right, everyone has it? Okay. So it says, Vayihi Terach Shivim Shana Vayoledet Avraham et Nachor ve'et Haran. And Terach, when he was 70 years old, he had Avraham, Nachor, and Haran. And then they tell you the line of Terach, Avram's father, Ele toldot Terach. Terach holidet Avram et Nachor et Haran, ve'Haran holidet Lot, right? And then it tells you that Terach, Vayikach Terach et Avram beno ve'et Lot ben Haran ben beno ve'et Sarai kalato eshet Avraham. Simply just tells you that Terach took his son Avram and his and Avram's wife, and they set out together to go to Ur Kasdim. Right now, they set out from Ur Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. Right, and then along the way they stopped. They stopped in Haran. So we already know that that Avram's father had already set out on some kind of a journey, self-initiated, and then we have a break in that's the end of Parshat Noach, and then we open up with Parshat Lech Lecha, and when we open up, it says, Vayomer Hashem al Avram, Lech Lecha, right? The very famous pasuk that we all know. God said to Abraham, go away from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. And he gives us this extraordinary blessing with uh, Ve'escha legoy gadol ve'avarcha ve'agadola shemecha ve'heye beracha. I will bless you and make you great, and you shall become a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I will curse, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. And Avram went as God had directed him. Now, what I'm going to ask you, we can, I'll give this a little bit more frontal in the beginning. If somebody really wants to say something, that's also fine with me. Why did God pick Avraham? We don't know anything about him at all. Nothing. Now, that is sharper. That distinction is much sharper when you look at why Avraham, the Torah does tell you why Avraham chose Noach, right? About Noach, we are told, wait, I just lost my text. Yeah. We have a number of verses about Noach. It says that Noach matzah chen be'enei Hashem, right? Noach found favor in God's eyes. And it also tells you that Noach is ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav et Elohim hitalech Noach. Noach was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age, and he walked with God. So this is a very sharp distinction, and that's the type of things. In other words, if you take a look at the opening of Parshat Lech Lecha, and when we first hear about Avraham, who is really the father of faith of all monotheistic religions, we're not told anything about him. And that leaves a huge, wide open space for the commentaries and the Midrash come in to try to fill that out. So that's where I'm going to take us. Now, we could look later on in the narrative and we see that Avraham is someone who is korei b'shem Hashem. He builds different mizbachot, he builds different altars, and he calls out in God's name. He's a cosmopolitan man. He's the only one of the forefathers that they say that he has b'nei brit. He has allies. And these are things we know about him afterwards, besides the more significant narratives that we know about him. But we really don't know why it is that God chose him. So I want to share with you that the Sfat Emet, I'm going to bring us straight to Hasidut, and introduce you to the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet, Reb Aryeh Leib Alter of Gur, was born in 1847 until died in 1905, and one of the masters of the Polish tradition. The Polish Hasidic masters were of a much more, I would say, rigorous intellectual and spiritual direction. His books, there was actually just a Kenneth last week in Jerusalem and a full day just about the Sfat Emet. And Art Green, who I'm sure many of you have heard of, put out a beautiful book in English called The Language of Truth. So people who are interested in accessing the Sfat Emet, that's an important and accessible work. So let's come in and what does he say? All right, the Sfat Emet opens up and he says, the Ramban argues, why does it say Lech Lecha without first mentioning Abraham's special status or merit? God doesn't say anything about why. You certainly would like to know the qualifications of your leaders before somebody picks them. Although these days that seems also to be a challenge, right? So he says, why doesn't he mention his special status? So the Zohar says as follows. Okay, I'm going to read a bit in Hebrew because that's like my music. All right. Zohar HaKadosh nir'eh ki ze atzmo hashevach sheshama ze hama'amar lech lecha. Okay. Now, Chassidut is hard to understand because they're subtle. So we've got to slow down and like tune in. What is he saying? Okay. He says, Ze atzmo hashevach. The Zohar says that in and of itself is the praise. What is in and of itself the praise? Ze atzmo hashevach. The fact that there were the words Lech Lecha that God said, Shene'emar Hashem Yitbarach lekol ha'anashim tamid. Kamo shene'emar, right? God is speaking to the people all the time. And then the Zohar says, Voy le'inun deshinte bechurehen. What is he saying? The Zohar says, Oi, to all of those people who are sleeping, right? All of those people who sleep in a slumber. Ve'Avraham Avinu shama v'kibel. Okay. I'm just reading you the text. I understand that you probably don't understand yet what it means, right? But we need to read it. I would say when we learn, there are different layers. You read through it, you see what words are. Hopefully, if you have enough faith, you say, oh, this must mean something, and then you go at it again. Okay? So we have to take a couple of sweeps. All right. Avraham heard and he received it. Umemela nikra rak hadibor elav. And so, because he heard it, it was as if the speech only came to him. Ki halo nimtza miyuchad lishmoa. But there wasn't anybody else who was really ready to hear. Rak hu, he was the only one. Aval bivadai ze hashevach atzmo shehaya mukhan lekabel hamamar. That is the praise in and of itself, that he was available to hear God's words. Okay. Now let's just stop for a moment. I think we need to make a shift. I think what Hasidus offers is what I believe. They offer you a naturalistic theology. A theology that, in my understanding, is something you can believe in. God's voice is not like there's this megaphone that comes out of the sky, right? What he's talking about is that what the Sfat Emet is saying is that God is speaking all the time. There's like this, there is a, so to speak, a presence, a force, let's take a look at the text again, right? God is speaking all the time. Avraham's the only one who heard it. That's what the Sfat Emet is saying. I'll show it to you inside if it's not clear to you. I suppose we could take a look at the English. It's a little harder for me to do that. All right. So the Ramban argues, how is it possible that they picked Avraham without saying his status? So the Zohar says that is exactly the praise. What is exactly the praise? Did anybody get it? That Avraham actually heard God. And then the Zohar goes on to say, God is speaking all the time, but nobody hears. So Avraham is the one who inclined his ear. He was able to hear. So the Torah wrote it. This is what he's saying. The Torah wrote it as if God was only speaking to him. And that's the praise. That was clear. And it's a very powerful reading. It's a very interior, deep reading, right? You can picture yourselves. I'm sure you've all had situations where you're speaking to people. And there's I don't know, maybe you've been in various situations where you're speaking and really you're speaking to many, many people, but there's really only one person in the room who's listening to you. So you can then go and say that it's as if you were just speaking to that person. That is what the Sfat Emet is saying. But what the Sfat Emet is doing is he's also teaching us something about how a Chassidut views how you hear God. It's a very naturalistic spiritual modality. And that is that the Torah is not just recording when God has there's some divine vocal cords that come out, but rather it is recording who hears Hashem, who hears God. So it's a very in-tuned teaching of the Sfat Emet. I hope you got that. If it's new, it's it's a subtle teaching, but I think it's a very, very important one, and it opens us up to the thought, to Hasidic thought. Now, Chazal, I'm going to start with Chazal. That is the rabbis from the Talmud, which is a real precursor to learning another piece of Hasidut, which is where I would like to take you. Okay. Now, they, in some sense, ask the same question. What is Avraham's journey? Right? Where is he going? Right? Where is he going? So you could say, well, because the Torah doesn't tell us where he's going. Lech lecha, right? There's another verse that I didn't bring you, which is a more straightforward one. It says, Lech lecha, go into yourself, which we'll get there in a moment. Okay? But here he says, he brings in a Midrash from Bereshit Rabbah. Bereshit Rabbah is a Midrash from the rabbis of the Talmud. It's the same period of time. So let's take a look at this Midrash, okay? Vayirma Hashem el Avraham, lech lecha me'artzecha. Rabbi Yitzchak patach. Right? Rabbi Yitzchak said as follows. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Mashal, to what is this similar? Le'echad shahaya over mimakom lemakom. To one who was passing from place to place. V'ra'a bira achat doleket. Okay? And he saw, and there's a machloket, there's an argument about what is this bira doleket. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this. And he saw either a building that is lit up or a building that is burning. Those are the different ways of reading this. But right now we're going to read it. Ra'a bira achat doleket. He saw a building, generally even a castle that was lit up. Amar, and he said, Tomar shahabira zo b'lo manhig. Right, he sees a building lit up, a castle lit up. He doesn't see anything else. He just sees it like lit up. So he says, Tomar shahabira zo b'lo manhig. Is it possible that there's like no owner of this building? Is there like nobody in charge here? Tzitz alav bal habira. It's really. The owner of the building looked out at him. Hitzitz is sweeter than like looked out. It's like he peeked out, right? Hitzitz alav bali bira. The owner peeked out and he said, Ani hu bal habira. I'm the owner of the building. Now, already, what does that tell you right there? What are they doing, right? Now, just to those of you who enjoy the structure of learning, in Hebrew, you have mashal and kach, right? So in English, you have this is analogous to, and then so. So that would be, here's the example, the analogy, and then they want to bring you the meaning, the nimshal of the narrative, the story they're bringing. And he says, kach lefi shahaya avinu Avraham omer, tomar shaha'olam hazeh b'lo manhig. Right? So they want to bring it home. Is it possible that the world there's no one in charge? There's no creator? Hitzitz alav hakadosh baruch hu va'amar lo, ani hu ba'al ha'olam. Vayomer el Hashem el Avram lech lecha. And so God said to him, go forth. Now, there's a number of beautiful things going on here in this very, very brief mashal, which I'd like to kind of draw our attention to. All right. I want you, first of all, to notice that already in the time of the Talmud is telling you, right, the Gemara, or this Chazal, the thinkers, the sages of the Gemara are telling you, well, what kind of a journey is this? Right, they're already telling you that Avram's journey is not a physical journey. Avram's journey is a spiritual journey. He's looking for God. And they're already answering, he's looking around the world and he's going from place to place. And he's looking at this beautiful ornate building and he doesn't see it doesn't seem like anybody's running anything. So he asks, is it possible that there is really all of this structure and this order and this universe and this world, and there is nobody running it? Now, what's important here is that the answer and the response only comes because there's a question. Because Avraham asks, then God responds. And I would suggest that is how they're reading the Lech Lecha. In other words, the answer to the question is, why did God choose Avraham? Because Avraham's seeking for God. That's the blanks that the mashal here is filling in, right? When I asked you at the beginning, and we opened up, and we saw that the Torah tells us nothing about Abraham, absolutely nothing, except that his father was heading someplace. And then the Torah just opens up with this extraordinary statement where God chooses him and picks him for the future destiny of what God wants to bring into the world. And we know nothing about him. And what the Midrash is coming along here to tell us is that who is this person? He's a seeker. God, here they're filling in saying, God said Lech Lecha because Avraham is looking for God. Okay, so I'd like to take it a little bit more deeply, and is everybody okay so far? You with me? Okay, we got Sherry and Marianne and Harriet and Susan and some other silent people in the background, but I like to see folks. So, okay, I want to introduce you to my Rebbe. My Rebbe, Reb Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, a sefer I've been carrying around with me for many, many, many years. I love his teachings because I find them very, I would say, both very personal, very existential. I find them to be actually a deep spirituality that you can live with. I really think it points you to a real plausible spiritual life. And first of all, this particular mashal, if you haven't learned it before, it's really classic. It is like the main classic mashal that talks about the metaphor that it speaks about Avraham. And many of the commentators do expand on that. And the Mashiach, Reb Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, who was in 1800 to 1854, it comes from the same school as the Sfat Emet. And he's going to now expand on this parable that we just took a look at. Okay. So the first part is not going to relate to it. This is one lengthy piece of the Mashiach, which I've broken up into two sections. So I'm really asking you to kind of go out on a limb with me here. This is not easy material to learn for first shot, but I think that the ideas are very accessible. Okay. Okay, so we had said that Avraham, already we saw in Chazal that Avraham is a seeker, and we need to understand more about his search. So here he's going to guide us a little bit more. Mordechai Yosef opens up with a verse from Yeshayahu, which is very common, and the Midrash does that also. They'll bring a pasuk, a verse, which is from the prophets. And so he reads, Ki atzuk mayim al tzameh v'nozlim al yevesha. Even as I pour water on the thirsty soil and rain upon dry ground, so I will pour my spirit on your offspring and my blessing upon your posterity. This verse it's very visceral. I will pour water on the thirsty. And those of you who have been to Israel in the desert in the summertime really know how parched things get. Right? And Avraham is in the Negev, right? He's in this parched area. Avraham himself is being viewed as somebody who is thirsty. A person who is seeking spiritually is thirsty. There is something missing that one is seeking for. And so this pasuk is being brought to answer the question really about why is it that Avraham was chosen? And he brings in the pasuk, that's all not stated. We have to learn how to read and how to hear these texts. right? Even as I pour water on a thirsty soil and rain on dry ground, you can feel it soaking in. So I will pour my spirit on your offspring, right? God is saying, I will pour, right? I will saturate, right? I will fill, saturate, and give to you and give my blessing upon your posterity. That certainly speaks directly to the verses that talked about Avraham, where it said, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go, and I will bless you, and you will be a blessing, and I will bless those who will bless you. So those are the textual links and connections between the verse, why they brought this verse, but also more deeply the meaning of what he's talking about. Now the Meshulach picks up on this and he says, כאשר התחיל אברהם אבינו עליו השלום לבקש ולחפש אחר שורש החיים שלו. It says, when Avraham began to seek after שורש החיים שלו, the source of his own life. Now, that's all very new. What's the seeking? Right, the Meshulach is telling you that God, when God says lech lecha, he's telling him to go and seek for meaning. What is the source of his own life? Shor Shachayim. Shor Shachayim is, what is the root, what is the core root meaning of your existence? Okay. אחרי שהבינו כי כל חמדת העולם הזה לא ייתכנו להיקראות בשם חיים אמיתיים. After he realized that it was inconceivable that all of the, it's not just lusts, but all of the kind of, I would say, the fleeting things that happen in your life, right? That's not really true life, right? All of the worldly desires, they only serve to remove, this is very important, one chases around different desires. They only serve to remove numerous anxieties and obstacles, right? But once all of those obstacles are negated, what is the true source of life upon which the world was created? So the Meshulach here casts Avraham as a person who is an existential seeker. He's seeking for the root of his life. And he's asking, the language is very powerful here about Shor Shachayim, looking for the root of your life. And once we think we want this and we think we want that, you want a vacation and you want to do this, you want to do that. When you take care of all of those things, like, okay, but what's underneath it all? What is at the root of life? And this is how he views what it is that he's seeking for. Once you finally remove all of the anxieties and all the difficulties, then one comes to say to themselves, what is really resting at the root of all this? And this is how he views what it is that Avraham is asking. Al Shem Amar Lo, Hashem Yitbarach, Lech Lecha. And here, he's saying that God answers him by telling him how to seek. Lech lecha. Go to yourself. Lech lecha le'atzmecha. Do you see, is everybody following me? I know I'm going back and forth a bit between the Hebrew. Are you following me? Right? God then responds to him when he's seeking after what is the root of my life, what is really significant, what is really most meaningful, what really needs to drive my life. And as he begins to figure out that certain things really are not so significant, God then finally turns to him and he says to him, Lech lecha. The words are beautiful. He's answering him. Go to yourself. Go deeper into yourself. Ki be'emet kol divrei ha'olam hazeh lo yikar'u b'shem chayim. All of the various, you could say, all of the right, he doesn't translate it actually in this particular text. All of the kind of like superfluous things are not really the true life. True life you will find inside yourself. That is the essence of life. And that's where this verse is reading the Lech Lecha, that God answers him and directs him more deeply to himself. Right? This is a very naturalistic and interior understanding about spiritual seeking and how actually it is. Now we're going to get a little bit farther about how is it that actually one here's God. It's a rather audacious thing to do in 45 minutes on a Zoom share, but we'll give it a try. Okay. All right. The Mashulach continues, and that I'd like to look at with you. Okay. He continues to try to answer that question. What exactly is missing? Avraham's looking for something, and something is missing. What is he looking for? And he continues, and he says, "Ve'al ze ne'emar, mihu bal habira." Remember our story? We're coming back to the mashal, we call it mashal in English, the analogy that I offered you in the beginning. Yeah, about the bal habira, somebody, the master of the castle. Who is the master of the castle? So he says, he continues with that, and he says, Al ze ne'emar b'midrash. The Midrash says, Mihu bal habira, who is the master of this house? Hitzitz alav bal habira. Right? The master peeked out, and he answered him. And now the Meshulach is going to continue to say how it is that he speaks to him. Ach birot Avraham Avinu alav shalom. Avraham Avinu is still trying to figure things out. 1 second. I'm going to find the Hebrew. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much Hebrew here. 1 second. Okay. So he says to him, I'm now in the continuation where I wrote continuation of Lech Lecha. Yeah. So he said, right, he again is asking about the city. And the master, the Holy One, blessed be he, right? He says to him, it is, hitzitz alav, velo alav. That's actually quite extraordinary. Kefisha nireh haya lo lichtov. He said he looked elav, velo alav. He didn't say he looked towards him, but he looked upon him, from within him. All right? We're going to keep going. Ach birot Avraham Avinu alav hashalom. The question is, where is Avraham seeking? From where is he seeking to find God? So the nuanced reading is it says he looked elav, not elav, but alav, from within him, meaning that God himself, right? The person who is hitzitz alav, God himself looks out from within Avraham. There is a portion of God which is within Avraham, and that is coming out from within him. What is that seeking? We're going to continue. Hopefully it'll make sense as we unpack this a little bit more. Ach birot Avraham Avinu alav shalom, et esek dor haflaga. Avraham Avinu is now looking in history. Right? He's looking, right? He's looking at the flood, and he's looking at the Tower of Babel, and he's looking basically at civilization, at the destruction of civilization, and he's asking there, and he's looking at this, and it's disturbing. This is very important. He's at, what is the Birad Doleket? So is the Birad Doleket? Is it this destruction in the world? Kehaya be'enav lepele. It was like unfathomable to him. Ma'od hir'im b'nafsho. He was profoundly disturbed when he looked at the destruction of the world and the collapse of civilization, and he said, Mi bara ele. Yeah, I think we're not far away from this today sometimes. Take a look at this. Are you with me? Right? He's saying that the Birad Doleket, Abraham's seeking is he's looking out on the world, civilization is looking around, everything around him is collapsing. Nothing seems to be functioning in any orderly manner. And he says, who created this? Was there a creator in this, this destructive environment? So he says, Mi bara ele, hitzitz alav bal habira, hainu heshiv lo hakadosh baruch hu. Can I keep reading a little bit in Hebrew? Is that okay? Can you follow? Because it's important for me. All right. Hitzitz, because he asked this passionate question about justice, about the destruction of civilization, as a result of that, as a result of him saying, who created this? Hitzitz alav bal habira. The person, you could say, who created the world then answered him and said to him, Halo tireh bi'atzmacha. See, and I'm not going to say just by yourself, see from within yourself. Ki lo kol ha'olam lo yakshe. It doesn't bother anybody in the world. Ve'in echad mehem sam alev. Nobody cares. Lomar mi asazot. There's nobody asking who created these civilizations that are self-destructing. Lomar mi asazot. There's nobody asking that question. V'ach be'enecha yipaleh. It's just in your eyes that it's a wonder. Now, this is very important. Umitar omot libcha. And from the stirring in your heart, but it means more than stirring. It means from the disturbance in your heart. Because you are disturbed, tuchal she'er asher bivadai nimtza borei. So very important. Because your heart is so disturbed, because you are suffering because the world is so corrupt, that suffering is the answer. Ki bivadai nimtza borei. Surely there is a creator who created all of this. Ve'heir libcha. Now he's taking a step further. He's saying like this. This is where we move away from, I would say, the humanist, right? Could be an ethical humanist. What he's saying, this is not just an ethical humanist who feels that I have to, somehow just feels that the world needs to be improved, it needs to be a better place. Here he's saying that disturbance that you have in your heart, that awoken, hu she'ir libcha b'nafshecha, that's God speaking in your heart. The disturbance in your heart that refuses to acknowledge and refuses to accept that this is the way the world is, it is that stirring in your heart, which is how God speaks to you. V'zeh lashon alav. And now he wants to go back. If you remember, he said he tzitz elav, not he peeked at him, but rather he peeked through him. Are you with me? See the difference? As opposed to viewing God as inside, outside, he's really viewing humanity, right? This is also just a very powerful idea. One of the most powerful ideas in Hasidut is that the extent to which a human being's soul is refined, that is the extent to which they reflect the divinity in the world. That God, a human being, is a piece of God. They can be completely detached from that, but God is revealed within the humanity and the soul and the heart of human beings in accordance to how much they refine themselves. In this particular instance, it's in accordance to how much Avraham Avinu is disturbed. And it is that very disturbance which is God speaking through him, who says, yes, I am a creator. Ani barati elu. I created these. I'm going to do one more brief piece with you. Rav Tzadok HaKohen is a student. He was a student of the Mashilach, Rav Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz. And he says it actually in the most straightforward way. So I think it's worth seeing it inside. Fundamentally, what the masters are saying is the sense of morality that you have crying out inside of you. That is God calling out from inside your heart. So I want you to see it inside. The Mashilach hints towards that. You have to labor to get to it. But Rav Tzadok says it more straightforward. V'kach shamati. Right, he's also talking about that same Midrash, which is Hitzitz alav bal hibira. The first one that we did is I forget what it's called in English. Right, the master of the building. V'kach shamati al hitzitz alav bal hibira. And this I have also heard regarding the master of the palace looking upon him. Lashon alav, the language, right? The phrase that says upon him, Ratzah lomar, it means to say, she'amar lo, she'ata be'atzmecha gam kein michlal bal habira. Oh, that's pretty radical, all right? He says, you yourself are the master of the palace. I'm going to read it and go back. Ki halo kol haolam ro'im zeh ve'ein levavam ro'esh. You are the Baal Habirah. In other words, he's saying that Avraham's heart is burning. It's no longer a historical thing that I'm looking at the, sacred history of the flood, that I'm disturbed about something on the outside. Avraham is the Baal Habirah. That's what he's saying here. It's extraordinary chidush here. It's extraordinary what he says. He says, Avraham is the building, and here it's not the building that's lit up, but the building that's burning up. What's burning up? Avraham's heart is burning up. All right? Everybody sees. Everybody sees the problems and the issues, and nobody is disturbed. Right? Nobody's busy. Nobody is concerned to ask, is there somebody running this here? Is there some structure? Is there some order? Is there some ethics? Is there some morality? Right? Ulivaksho, and seeking him out. Right? He said, but now what he says, v'zeh she'ata mevakesh gam zehu mitzidi. Oh, this is extraordinary. The fact that you are asking, the very fact that you are asking, that is also from me, God, and from me that dwells within your heart. Ubilibcha makom shchinati. And from within your heart is the divine presence. Vizetam ani. And that is the meaning when it said ani ubal habira. Okay, look, we've just made a very, very deep shift. We're talking about Avraham who is seeking. Avraham as a seeker. Avraham was seeking for meaning. Avraham who's been told, Lech el atzmacha, to yourself, to the essence. That's where we started in the Meshiloach. Let's go a little bit deeper. No, it's not that one is disturbed about things that are on the outside. He said, no, he is disturbed from within the depths of his being about, and what he's saying to him, that disturbance and that stirring in his heart, that is the place of the Shekhinah. That's what he's saying. That is the place of the divine presence that lives in his heart, that is Hetzitz alav, that is peeking from within him. So the Lech Lecha is a directive. It is a spiritual directive that Avraham has to look deep within himself and locate the Shoresh HaChayim, the root of life, the core of meaning, and to be attentive to that in order to be able to discern in order to be able to discern meaning. And that is coming from him of crying out and saying, Ani hu Baal Habira. Who is the Ani? It's Hashem also who speaks within Avraham's heart. So that was a lot for 45 minutes in a new environment. So I hope this kind of naturalistic, more interior, and very deep and profound, I think, Hasidic understanding of Avraham's of Avraham really as the seeker, as the person who is really considered to be the father of faith. And this is how they view faith. So let's just open it up. If anyone wants to ask anything or contribute or share, be happy to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Batya. Yes, we'd love to open it up. If anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hands and we can call on people to unmute, or you can also write things in the chat as well. Were there any questions or comments?
But I think that Marianne, if you want to speak, you're muted.
Oh, no, I was just laughing when she said everything is clear. So I had to laugh.
So what's not clear? So this is it's a challenging piece to do in this context.
Yes, but it's very interesting. Thank you.
I'd love to know what was clear, what wasn't clear, what was interesting, what was new. But it's the challenge in this context.
Well, this is pretty new for me. I don't understand Hebrew, but so I'm glad that you translated everything.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you again so much for your presentation, and thank you all for joining and learning with us. As Rabbi Shmuley mentioned, we have another class next week on Thursday, and you can learn about all of our upcoming classes on our website. And you can also always find all the recordings from our past events in the Learning Library there as well. So thank you again very much. And
My pleasure.
thanks.
Okay.
Take care.